Okay, it's 5 o'clock. We'll call the budget meeting to order. We have a quorum. The mayor is absent, and so I'm going to turn this over to Cheryl and maybe Mike. There we go. Can you hear me now? Okay, so this is budget workshop number 3. Basically, it's the first one for fiscal 2025 budget. This budget that you received, this proposed one we received on Friday, so I hope it gave y'all some time to look at it. That was my intent. That's why I sent it out on Friday. This budget is essentially a flat budget with the only change reflecting the city's TMRS contribution rate for 2025. The rate increased 2.4% and for about $30,000. This budget also assumes that the city will be fully staffed 100% of the year, although we know that doesn't happen, but in budgeting you have to just assume that in case it does. It's not anticipated that there will be any new sources of revenue or significant increases in revenue. Sales tax is remaining flat. There's no big increases from this year to last year, although it may be skewed a little bit because we had that big payment in July of last year, that big audit payment of $140,000. So you got to take that out. And so at the end of the day, this budget has a projected shortfall of $146,326, and the shortfall is likely to increase as we increase expenditures. And I gave you all the cost of a 1% because I know that we have the discussion item is, on salaries, but we also still have the following expenditures that are subject to change. We have our TML insurance with property, workers' comp, and liability that we're going to have a meeting with our rep here pretty soon and get that. We also have lawn services that we need to do a bid on, and I don't think it's going to, I don't really have any idea where that would come in at, but I'm hoping it's not any more than what we're paying now. And the ambulance services contract, I've got to get with the Galveston County Health District. We did receive the one for the animal control. It only went up $500. And then the IT services contract, Mike's working with the IT services guy to get something in contract so we have like a flat amount every month instead of this bouncing amount that we're looking at. When's the lawn service bid due? Well, we have not done that bid yet. We're hoping, and it's probably maybe not going to be done before we adopt the budget. Okay. But if we have to, if it goes over, we'll have to do a budget amendment. If it goes under, we'll have savings. So, okay. But the discussion items, of course, is the top 4 priorities that you have listed back on our first meeting: the salaries, the city hall project, the maintenance of the trees and the right-of-ways, and the ditches, and the rainy day contribution. One thing I did do differently this year was I pulled out the restricted funds into its own budget, so we don't have the restricted funds with the general fund budget. So that's why on page 15 you'll see the restricted funds. These are the ones that are restricted by statute. They were prior mixed in with the general fund, but I think it skewed a lot of these numbers, so that's separate. We also have a new fund, the hotel tax fund. This is our hotel tax that we've been collecting over the years. Separated that out. By law, it's supposed to be separated out anyway, so that's separated out. And then the rainy day fund, gave y'all a snapshot of that. Capital equipment, there's just nothing in there. We're just building that fund up with some transfers from the general fund. We expect to have, about $150,000 in there at the end of the fiscal year. And then Plaza 10, this is Plaza 10. This is basically for the Plaza 10 meeting, this one here, so for us to do discussion. So that kind of runs through this this proposal, and going to open it up to Mike and open it up to the discussion items and any questions.
I don't really have any significant points about it unless I was more interested in addressing any questions you guys might have.
So on, where's city council budget? So page 5 on the city council budget. So remind me again, dues, memberships, and subscriptions, what is that versus, what does that pay for? The dues, membership, and subscriptions, this is just a small amount, but we reclassed. I have all that here. So I'm asking because we got our invoice from the Clear Lake Chamber, which is $2,500 for our membership and $2,000 for the boat lane parade
Correct.
sponsorship, and then League City, Mike, $300 or $800? You were on that email, weren't you?
No, I was not.
Okay, maybe that was just me and Randy. They keep trying to, the League City Chamber is hurting for members, so they keep trying to get us to up our membership, and we keep saying we're going to keep it. But I can't remember if it's 300 or 800.
I believe
so, sorry,
Randy
keep
showed
going.
me that, and they were asking for us to up from like 800 or 600 or 800 to like 3,400
yeah.
or something
so
like that.
I think that one's 800. So I just want to
Yeah.
make sure those two chamber.
So,
and
in that 100 in the dues line item, that is Galveston County Mayor and Councilman Association dues. But now if you drop down to chamber relations and
I see
events,
that. Okay.
that's where we have the Clear Lake Area COC membership dues for $2,500. The boat parade is at $2,000. Then we bought a tray for the boat parade for $7,200. I'm sorry, $72. And then we did the blessing of the fleet for $2,500. I believe we did the blessing of the fleet because we had prior commitment to that.
Yeah. Well, the mayor's going to want to keep doing that. So do we? So all of that came out of that chamber relations
Yes.
and events.
Yes.
And so we think we've budgeted enough then to cover all of that again.
Yes. Well, unless any of them increase, which I haven't. I don't think. Have you?
No, I don't.
Okay.
I've received no communication of changes in pricing.
Yeah, I was just looking through my emails to find the one from Brian at League City. Okay. So do you want to walk through this? Do you guys want to ask questions? How do you guys want to do this? Do you want to talk about our discussion items? Sure. Mike, please.
Okay, Cheryl, looking at this, our expected revenues for this year are significantly less than last year. And if you back out even the ARPA funds out, we're still down like 100,000.
Well, you're going to be because that audit we had. Remember, we had that extra payment for sales tax last year.
Okay.
That came in at 140,000. So that's going to be skewed for that's
Right,
for
so
last
that's
year.
340. That's 440. So that puts us. Okay, that puts us right.
Yeah.
That's where it is.
So it's
Okay.
going to be, that audit payment that we had in July of last year was just a one-time thing. I don't suspect it's going to happen. It would be great if it did, but I just don't suspect it's going to happen again. Not anytime soon.
Other questions? So I have a question. So what does this budget include from a salary perspective? What increase?
Nothing.
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 Okay, so
The
that-
only thing that it does in salaries is it reflects that increase in TMRS. That's the only.
That's it?
Yeah.
Okay. So what's the plan for that?
Well, that's where.
Ultimately, that's up to you guys. If you look at the front page, Cheryl put a schedule on there if you want to do across-the-board raises on a fixed percentage, but that's a discussion we need to have about what your plan is. PD was addressed with a significant increase last year. If you ask the chief, they're still way behind. It's still hard to attract. It's hard to attract police officers in most every agency. League City is paying a lot of money currently. And if you go up to the Metroplex, they're starting people out at over $100,000 a year, but some of those cities are going broke on some of that too. I have I have concerns about the hourly wages that some of our non-police employees make. Not to discount the police wage either, but we have people who are working here for a pittance compared to what they could earn if they left the city and went somewhere else with the skills that they possess. I think it's important that we address that, and it requires a financial commitment. The counter to that, the plus and the minus being we have a kind of flat revenue stream. And so we have to consider that when you balance out the 4 priorities that council established in our first meeting as things you want to focus on moving forward with in the long run. If you want to start with employee retention and making sure we pay our employees a wage that's livable, I think that should be our first focus. I think that any excess budgetary remains that we have at the end of each fiscal year, when Cheryl does her projections leading up to the beginning or at the beginning of the budget process, I think that's a decision-making time for council on what you want to do with those carryover funds toward those other 3 issues that you established. I think we need to address pay for our employees first. I think the others, I'm not discounting those. We have a city hall. We don't need a new city hall tomorrow, and that's a long-term commitment. The rainy day fund is
Healthy.
It's established and it's solid. It's not something that's shriveling. So I don't see that as our primary function, our primary need to focus on. And then we always will need a maintenance program for our rights of way. With the trees, we saw that most of the problems we had with electrical capacities or electrical continuation of service was due to trees falling down. That's always the case. Rarely do you just have high wind take out a pole. It's usually a tree that's due to the high wind. And so I think we need to plan on making investments in that, but I think the best time for us to do that is at the beginning of a budget preparation cycle, when we look at Cheryl's projections, assuming that we can make sure she stays here for another year, and see what we're going to have left, and at that time we prioritize those funds moving forward. So there's a couple of ways we can skin the cat for salaries. The very first thing I think we need to do is some sort of market analysis. I can get on TML and do one of those relatively cheaply. And we don't have a lot of different position labels, so it won't be a heavy lift, as long as they have something comparable for us. The other thing I mentioned was about the prospect of incorporating some sort of merit pay that's not a continuation of salary, but a singular, what did you call it, Cheryl? No, it was a merit based on a singular stipend is what it was. It was a merit at the end of the year, or a bonus type of thing for outstanding work, contributory excellence, what have you. I can tell you that we've got 2 guys that don't make a lot of money here who everybody on this island would really miss if they left, in Jorge and Odie. They work like pistons and engines, and they never stop. And I think it's imperative that we retain them, because you don't find people in a public works sector everywhere you go that really bust it every day, and they do. So we have some things that we have to wade through there, but I would ask that you focus primarily on pay this year.
Can I ask or for an explanation or clarification on the TMRS contribution rate increase from 12.73 to 15.13%? Was that a decision someone made? Is that something's required by the state? Like, what's going on with that?
So that's Texas Municipal Retirement System, is TMRS. That is our limit that's our contribution rate. So the city matches like a 2-to-1 on our retirement. So this has to come up to fund that unfunded liability that we carry for our retirement. There's no cap on it because we adopted it last year when we set that 7%, that there's no statutory cap anymore. So it's going to continue to go up as long as that unfunded liability gets bigger. And they set this through their actuarial every year. They do it at actuary.
We were told it's now 15.13.
Yeah, yes.
Okay.
So it is, yes. And it starts in January. So we're going to finish out the year at the 12.73 and start in January with the 15. So that rate's based on a calendar year, not a fiscal year.
So last year when we did the raises for PD, if you'll remember, I said something to the effect of, let's take care of PD this year, figure out what we need to do to take care of the rest of our staff next year, being this budget year that we're talking about. When I made the comment at our budget meeting about salaries, that market analysis was really where I was hoping we would start. I don't know what to increase salaries by because I don't know if we're where we're at compared to the market. So I would be in favor of starting there. I've been a proponent of merit-based pay, bonus, whatever you want to call it, for a very, very long time. So I'm not opposed to that either. But again, what does that look like once we bump up, if we bump up employees and bring them to market? Do we then wait and hold off and implement that the following budget year, or do we think we can figure it out in the budget to do a merit-based increase on top of bringing everybody to market this year? That's my thought.
So there's a way to kind of pad that as well. You kick those, if you have increases in pay, you kick those in the second quarter of the fiscal year. So basically everything stays frozen for the first quarter of the fiscal year. And for the first 3 months, you're waiting through that analysis to see what it takes. So whatever impact it is, you factor it in for only 3 quarters of the year, which reduces it in that first year, but it doesn't reduce it in the years that follow, obviously. But I had intended, my apologies, I had intended to get on that right away. Hurricane Beryl set me back. I've lost a little bit of time. I will get started on doing some research and analytical look into salaries beginning next week, and make that a priority so that I might even be able to have some data for us by the end of September. But I've got to get some numbers to Cheryl first so that she knows how to crunch them and make sense of it all.
Chief, or Mike, this might be a question for you. We used to have a step pay with police. We still have that, right? I'm getting a no and a yes. Okay. Looking at both sides of the table. Questions, comments?
Well, we're in the same spot we were last year. We're projecting a deficit,
right?
And of course we came in couple hundred thousand over again, which is great. But I'll ask the same question: how do we get to not having a planned deficit again? And we're talking about raises, which is great. If everybody needs to get paid, that's great. But we can't just keep piling it on because we've got a savings account. But at some point, we have to either do less or have less here, because as a city government, if we didn't have that big savings account, we can't go into debt. It's not legal to operate like the federal government at our level. So it's nice that we basically can pretend like we're going to do that. But how do we offset this versus just adding and adding and adding? And I know there's a minimum we're required to provide legally as a city, but if we're going to spend $100,000 more on something, is there $100,000 somewhere else that we choose to do that we don't have to? How do we manage that? Because otherwise we're just getting told, well, this is the minimum it's going to cost to do it, and it is what it is. if we didn't have that money in the bank, we'd have to face that question seriously. So I'll ask that question, how do we deal with that now versus waiting on it to run out of money?
Do you want me to mention the elephant in the room in hope that you don't terminate me on the spot?
Sure.
Comes out of your mouth, not ours.
Understood. One of the things that concerned me when I applied for this job was that the city did away or set at a level 0 property tax. And I'm not a proponent of big government, big taxes, but the whole purpose of property tax is to stabilize your income, because ad valorem property taxes are a consistent and dependable revenue stream. Sales taxes are not. And when you look at cities who rely more than 50% on sales revenues, they are absolutely at the whim of the economy. And look at what COVID did to Webster. Look at what COVID did to Kemah. The complete absence of a steady revenue stream, even if it's a small one, is truthfully kind of frightening to me as city administrator, because it's hard to plan a year out. If a tornado ripped through Home Depot and Target tomorrow, we're not building anything. And if they don't rebuild, we're certainly not building anything. Roads, what have you. And that's truthfully kind of frightening to me. It's an elephant in the room nobody wants to discuss. Nobody likes to hear about taxes. And I'm not I pay an ungodly amount of taxes personally. And I'm not in support of everything they go to, honestly. But in my mind, the purpose for taxes is to pay for the minimal infrastructure that you have in a city. And ad valorem taxes on property are the most dependable revenue stream that you're going to have. And that's just the nuts and the bolts of it. It's a bonus to have a big, prosperous, robust revenue stream from sales taxes, but it is just volatile. It can be mercurial, and so you have to factor that in.
Right, but luckily that is the game we play. We do have a year of, if a tornado comes through and takes it all out, we've got a year or 10 months. We can always implement an ad valorem tax well, at the end of the year. But that's an extreme circumstance where it goes to zero. That's very unlikely. That's what the rainy day fund is for. And it does get frustrating to hear we can't cut, and the answer is not take from the citizens to provide this. What about the cut? Where do we cut? There's a lot of money in this budget we spend that we don't necessarily have to provide. So again, I'd like to see on the next budget. I've asked this 2 or 3 years in a row now. I think, hey, here are all of the things that aren't required, right? How do we cut? What is a minimal government? Say that tornado rolls through, knocks everything out. We've only got the money in the bank. We have no ad valorem tax. What's the plan?
Well, we could do away.
How do you do that?
You can't do away with insurance. That's a big one. You can do away with our IT services. You could do away with our lawn service. There's no fluff in that budget at all.
Well, you say there's no fluff, but there is a lot of fluff.
Well,
we don't have to have the nice version of everything. So what I'm saying is, okay, if our landscaping budget is $100,000 and we're spending $25,000 on flowers and flower beds, you can just have grass, right? Right. Well, that's what I'm saying. But that's the discussion that I always want to have in these meetings, rather than let's go into let's put a property tax in. I mean, that's not cool.
I'm not telling you I'm a proponent of adding a property tax. I'm telling you that's the way you get to a constant revenue stream. You have a volatile system of revenue when you only have sales tax revenue. You can cut the bones. I don't think the citizens, and you're right, Ronnie, I don't think it's what the citizens want, but I don't think your citizenry on this island wants you to take away flowers from the flower beds. I don't think the citizenry on this island wants you to stop bending over backwards for them either. There's a certain lifestyle that I think people grow accustomed to. We can absolutely cut those niceties out, Alex. It can be done.
I'm not suggesting cut the niceties out right now, but on the flip side of that, you have a lot of citizens who would go, what the heck do you mean I have to pay a property tax in Clear Lake Shores because you guys squandered all this money over 10 years? If we spend $250,000 out of our savings for 10 years, it's gone, right? That's what happens. So that's why every time we look at this every year, we should always consider how do we not dip into that at all or as little as possible. Because you're right, we're very fortunate to play this game where we have $3 million in revenue from Home Depot and Target. It's great. We're living a fantasy life, really, just like Kemah is. It's like, if gambling came in, they'd never pay tax, right? But that's what people want us to do, is to keep that going. So.
That's an absolutely salient point and a very important one. Homestead exemptions can be set at a very high level, and they can be set to where they're locked in for certain age groups and that kind of thing. A lot of places do that. Setting a property tax on the commercial property is your most lucrative source, if it ever comes to that, Alex. But balancing things out, yes, we have a nice rainy day fund. Yes, if we got wiped out tomorrow, we could make do, and every contract we have has an out clause in it. So yes, if push came to shove, and we had to cut out the flowers, so to speak, we can do that. We can go back and pare everything down and redo it. I don't think that's the way everybody wants to approach the initial portion of the budget. And the reality is that everything gets more expensive every year. So if our revenue stream keeps up with it, that's fine. If not, then we do have to start paring down those contracts. I'm a little lost or a little unsure of what you're asking specifically for. Do you want us to bring you in a budget that is smaller each year?
I just would like to know where the extras are in the budget, right? The things that we do that we don't necessarily have to do. So when we're making a decision that, okay, we're going to budget, I'll pick on landscaping because it's an easy example. We're going to budget this. We really only need $75,000, but we're going to spend $100,000. Okay, we know that we're making the decision to budget extra because we want it to be nice, right? Rather than this is what it's got to be. That type of discussion, that just hasn't ever happened, really.
Well, but that cost is going to be based on whatever we put out in our scope of work in an RFP, which I guess when we review that later, whenever that...
Well,
which is new because we've never even had that before. So we're all, I mean, there may be a previous
well, because it's over
experience.
$50,000, you do have to go through that process. Right. And we can set that scope however this body likes it. We can definitely take that into consideration. Keep in mind, parks are very, very expensive, and they're not money generators, especially if they're not parks that bring in rentals and that kind of stuff. And Clear Lake Shores has a lot of parks. That's part of the allure to Clear Lake Shores is people love the parks here. But you have to decide. And just picking on the example you used, for the landscaping, what do we want our parks to be? Do we want them to be grass? Do we want them to be pretty and floral? How do we want them to be? How do we want to maintain them? What amenities do we want them to have? And when you start talking about cutting the fluff, that's, in my mind, that's the fluff you're referring to. And it is those amenities that they're the shinier pieces for the most part, because you don't have some of the infrastructure costs that a larger city has with the water and the wastewater and that kind of stuff. So you don't have the fabulous amounts of rolling stock that eat up a lot of your budget. What we have is a lot of contractual agreements because of the size of our staffing and the limitations we have, specifically IT, the phone services, all the cable that comes in here. I mean, Cheryl's using literally a checkbook balancing, a fancy version of a checkbook balancing and tax stuff to do our budget work and finance documents, and she's making do with it. So we're not living fat. But if you're wanting to give me a specific, come in at a flat budget, I can make that happen, but it won't be without pain.
Oh, I understood. I mean, and that's true, and that's what we always try to do, is we try to have a flat budget. That's the ideal world, right? That's what you want. And I have to ask that question every time, because if we're going to ask for $50,000 or $60,000 to pay everyone more, then we need to acknowledge that we're not doing any good with our EDC. We're not doing any good bringing in any more revenue. That has been a failed experiment. We've spent $10 million, and it's time to face the music. You know, if that's it, then that's okay too, I guess. But you know, if that's where we're going, then we'll know that in 10 years we'll be implementing some form of ad valorem tax, and we should start planning for that, I guess.
I'm not ready to say that, truthfully. I think there are some other things that we can look at. Those ideas that I have are not formulated formally enough and vetted formally enough in my own mind yet to discuss them here. I will talk to you about them offline, just some of the things I've slung against a wall since I've been here in 3 months. But I don't think we've exhausted every possibility of revenue stream absent invoking some new tax. The city owns certain properties that it's invested a lot of money in. We need to find ways to offset the maintenance of those things. Parking lots, example, they don't last forever. They need to be restriped. They have issues. They're concrete, but they still have issues. People run into things and break things, and they're around bars, so it's going to happen. But we need to prepare ourselves to maintain those types of investments that the city's put a lot of money into, and I don't think we've really been good about doing that so far. So we have some other ways to generate some smaller revenue streams, in my opinion.
Well, that's interesting, and Ronnie, your point to you can restrict who ends up paying your property taxes.
Yeah.
Maybe that's something we need to, or we should have done a long time ago, is to start exploring that, because there are properties that do require a lot more city funds to maintain the infrastructure we have than the residents, and that might be the stopgap, right? That fixes the whatever small deficit we have, and then the solution.
I'll make contact with somebody out there and look into it. Thanks.
Yeah, it may not be, hurt to have a plan in place, or at least have something on paper we can go to, because we're one box store away from doing that, essentially. And if Home Depot pulled out tomorrow, we'd be in trouble, right? So. Right.
And if we have
I'm saying we need to have some kind of plan just in case.
Well, so I think that kind of leads to where I was going to, sorry, Mike, I'm going to put you on the spot, but, some of these big ticket items that we have on our wish list, the City Hall project, the rainy day contribution, that requires some planning, and I had mentioned to him when I was in office last week, we have a strategic plan for the city. I think it expires, ends whatever this year or next year. And so do we need to start going through that process and working these conversations into that process, right? So as we're planning for the next 5, 6, 10 years, there's budget components that go along with that, so that we can be able to, if we determine a need for a City Hall project or what we want that rainy day contribution to be and these other things, so that we don't have to go with a TAX.
I think even the kids will understand what that spells. And you didn't put me on the spot. I kind of put myself on the spot talking about the elephant in the room. I've never delved into the pairing out of residential versus commercial properties, and if there's a limitation on the homestead exemption that a town or a city can install. I've got to do some legal research on that, but I'm going to, so thank you for that. By the way, if you want to come to my office and help me, you know where it is. The prospect of taking on a longer term plan, a strategic plan type of thing, that's something that we need to begin in a second quarter of the year type thing so that we can get through it before we ever get to the beginning of budget preparation. That's something that, because there's going to be a lot of groundwork that has to be done on different projects, different ideas, and that's all got to be done ahead of time before we can ever get to a budget speculation. But I will add, I don't think we need to pay somebody to do that.
Yeah, exactly.
We have enough people in this room that we can get something like that done.
Council, anything else? So, Alex, I'm going to look at you. What do you want Cheryl, I'm going to start with you. Do you want them to come back with a very, very trimmed down budget so we have something to compare to?
No, I don't think that's necessary. I mean, I think that fosters some good discussion that we might have a plan, because this is if we really think we're going to be running a deficit because sales tax is reasonably flat, we've seen that for 3 years, and the answer is, hey, Alex, there's not a lot we can cut out of here other than, so you cut out jamming on Jarbo and the pool and the flowers. Like, nobody wants to do that either. Those are the easy, low-hanging fruit, right? So if that's what we want as a city, then yeah, if we have to go and we have a deficit this year or even a year after that, but we have a plan where in a year, 18 months, we can implement some form of something else to try to offset that. That's at least a plan, right? That's better than just accepting it and sailing off into the sunset. So I think that was good.
Another option might be to shift some of the expenses around. These parking lots down here, I think, are EDC projects. So I think EDC could, I won't be spelling out here. EDC could pay to maintain those, or a portion of that. And that whole front area was an EDC project. Maybe they need to pay for some of the beautification costs. Just saying, that money, of course, we're using that money now to do program and pay and all that. But we're running out of available, and there's a couple of available opportunities right now. In the future, that may be one way. A lot of cities have hotel tax, which we don't have. So jamming on Jarbo, you pay, have a hotel tax. If ours goes up, and that's another thing we can take away from EDC, pay out a hotel tax, take that money from EDC and pay to plant flowers at the entry or something like that. So we can be creative about the way the money is used. We use the most restricted funds first. Most restricted is hotel tax, the second is EDC, and the roads and drainage is very restricted, of course, and then the general fund is not restricted. So it would be last.
So, Ronnie, you bring up a good point because, we don't have a hotel tax, but we have the tax we collect from our STRs, and we have it. That is something to look at because that's restricted in a way in what you can use that for. And so maybe we do need to get creative there because I think that can be used, the hot tax can be used for like tourism events, and I didn't think about the beautification piece, but that, yeah. Does this budget, Cheryl and Mike, reflect, so for the hot tax, that, do we know if we've collected from everybody? Our taxes for all of our STRs?
Christy, can you answer that?
We have not. First quarter, we only had 10 on registration.
10 that have come in and got permits?
And legal to operate.
Okay.
And, you know, some people turn in $130, some people turn in $1,500.
We have this service now that
Right.
basically consumes 100% of the hot tax revenue to chase them down.
Not 100%.
If they're going to do that, are they still going to do that?
Well, I can't answer that because Angie and Randy are working on that, and I don't.
The company has done nothing. Just let them know.
Yeah,
We haven't paid them anything this year either.
that's correct.
That's correct. Because they haven't started to do anything yet.
Oh.
Maybe they won't pay them until they start.
Right. Okay.
Angie is still wading through their research and data collection process where they're trying to weed out who our actual short-term rentals are. I have concerns there about whether they're going to pay out or not. I truly do, based on some of the conversations I've overheard that Angie's been having with them of late. I hope I'm more pleasantly surprised than what I think I'm going to be. But we're not ready to pull the trigger on that yet because they haven't provided us anything solid enough to warrant payment.
Okay.
But to answer your question, we only had two estimators on paper. That's just been noted. And then second quarter was due July 31st. I think it's got like 5 on them that I've already sent everybody.
Okay, so my final question for now. Salary, so I'm going back to the salary. Sorry, Alex. But just trying to give Cheryl some direction for what to bring back to us. But I guess if we approve a budget without a salary increase until we see this market analysis, then we do a budget amendment later?
Yes, you can do
Okay.
that.
Anything else from anybody? Going once, going twice?
I would almost like to see a placeholder, so, sorry.
No, okay.
I would almost like to see a placeholder in here if we talk about long-term projects, right? Even if we haven't identified what that is, whether it's City Hall, whether it's rainy day, whether it's, I don't know, pick anything, just a placeholder for, future project that we're saving up for. I know, Mike, you brought that up, said, hey, if we want to do a major capital project, we can't afford it in 1 year. We put that money aside for 3 or 4 years and then execute on it. Should we just put a placeholder in this budget to see, just to start that? I don't know.
I honestly don't think this budget is the place for that. I think next year's budget is. I think the next budget cycle that we go through will be, because some of the discussion we've had here just tonight has given me a fistful of ideas for us to discuss ad nauseum for approaches. Ronnie, thanks for volunteering for all your help that you're going to provide. But I think we've got some ideas that we can pursue, and until we dig into those, Alex, I don't think we have a good grasp on how to put that placeholder in and what we might have.
That's fair. And probably should do the strategic plan and figure out what we want to do. Yeah.
Jeff, were you going to say anything? Okay. I will close our budget